At times of crisis, we lean towards the arts, and one of the reasons we lean towards the arts is it tells us about ourselves, it tells us about our experiences, it tells us about society, and we can share those experiences with other people who are enjoying the same type of content. One of the other things that we see happen regularly is reminiscence theatre, which is typically with older adults, and that is a theatre technique that involves talking to older adults about their memories, their experiences, their lives, and then performing them back to them. And that's been shown to have a really positive impact on the progression of dementia. So getting people from different backgrounds together to see the similarities between them and to share experience and to share stories.
Hello and welcome to the Experts in Health podcast, brought to you by Loughborough University. This podcast aims to highlight the latest research and trends in health as we welcome a variety of guests from a whole host of different disciplines. I'm Dr. Chris MacLeod, an academic in the School of Sport, Exercise and Health Sciences with an expertise in behavioural nutrition and public health. And today I'm delighted to welcome to Experts in Health Dr. Catherine Rees, who is a senior lecturer in drama at Loughborough University. Catherine, thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
So just to begin with, would you mind telling our listeners and me a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So I'm senior lecturer in School of Design and Creative Arts. One of the things that I'm really interested in is the way in which theatre is really important within our society. So it's not something that happens in isolation. It's something that that everybody can benefit from, everyone should have access to, and not just going to the theatre as well, not just going and doing it somewhere else in a special place that we call a theatre, but also the way in which we can think about the benefits of theatre coming into our lives, coming into our everyday practices, and just enriching people's lives through engagement, a kind of regular engagement with creative practice.
So when was your first experience with drama? How did you come to love drama, to be able to teach it?
That's such a good question. For me, it would have been in school and drama classes. I think one of the fantastic things about drama and theatre within education, within our school system, is it gives children the opportunity to get out from behind the desk, to get out from behind sitting still. I'm always saying to students, get up, try things out, make mistakes. It's a really safe space for us all to collaborate together creatively. One of the other really fantastic things that really attracted me to drama when I was young was the opportunity to work with other people, to work with my classmates, to make something creative with them. And also now I do it for a living. One of the fantastic opportunities that drama and theatre offers is the opportunity to work with other practitioners, to work with other experts, to work with academics, to really engage in interdisciplinary work. That kind of collaboration, creative problem solving together is something that's really attractive and appealing to me.
I can see that, and I can also see that there's quite a lot of themes there and behaviours that link quite nicely to why you're on this podcast talking to us about health, and we think about drama and health, and hopefully we'll get into that in a little bit. But one of the things we like to do with this podcast is to ask our guests at the beginning to give us a short, sharp statement to whet everyone's appetite about their area of expertise and interest, to let us know why is what we're going to talk about today so important to you and to our listeners.
So the first thing I would say is we've just come out of a major pandemic, which was obviously a very significant threat to our physical and mental well-being and health in the whole world. One of the first things that everybody did was they switched on to streaming services at that time. So many people were able to feel less isolated during the pandemic and during lockdown by engaging with creative content. So that's one of the key things I would say. How many of us binged box sets and then chatted to people about that over Teams and over Zoom during the pandemic? At times of crisis, we lean towards the arts, and one of the reasons we lean towards the arts is it tells us about ourselves, it tells us about our experiences, it tells us about society, and we can share those experiences with other people who are enjoying the same type of content. So that's one of the things that I would say.
Yeah, my appetite is whetted for sure with that. But now let's get into this, drama and health. So, how has your background, your expertise in drama brought you to the point to today where you're researching the role that drama plays in our health and well-being?
So initially, when I first started as a drama academic, I was very much a literary historian. So I would look at play text. I still do this to some degree, but I do it less. So I started off looking at play texts as cultural, historical, social objects. What do they tell us about the society that play has come from? What kind of political messages and ideologies does it explore? That's how my career started as a theatre academic. As I've moved on and wanted to explore other things, my approach and my interest has widened. So I'm much more interested in not just the society and culture of that particular time, but our society and culture today, and what are the challenges that we face as a society. And certainly some of the challenges that we face are to do with well-being and health, isolation, those kind of things. And so I'm really interested in how drama can, in an applied sense, and we'll probably come on to talk about a little bit more about what that means, but how instead of just seeing theatre as something, as I said, that happens over there in a theatre, we can engage with it as part of our society and part of our community and part of our everyday lives in an applied capacity to actually really benefit our health and well-being.
And for you personally, have you had any experiences with, drama where you've noticed that, it's improved your health and well-being at all the way through your life? Is it something you feel particularly bereft if you don't have any drama interaction or anything like that?
Yes, is definitely the answer to that. I mean, I go to the theatre all the time. And if I don't go for any period of time, for example, over the pandemic, I really miss that sense of sitting collectively in the dark with people and watching something that is a shared experience that we can all experience together, and then at the end we all celebrate through applauding. There's something very meaningful about that, and yes, I go to theatre a lot and feel very, very much miss it if I don't have the opportunity to do it.
Yeah, I agree with you with that. So, a bit more directly now then, how can drama support, you sort of started it there, but, how can it support our health and well-being? So
the first part of answering that question is that research shows that just going to the theatre aids our well-being and our health generally. It helps to counteract social isolation, for example. It gets people out of the house, and as I said, it gets people coming together and sharing a communal experience, talking to each other about a similar topic. So there is research that shows that just going to traditional theatre performances is really good for our well-being and helps to combat some of the sorts of problems that we see in health to do with people being isolated or lonely. So that's the first thing. The second thing is more to do with applied theatre, which I've talked a little bit about earlier. And in case your listeners don't know what applied theatre might mean, it really means taking theatrical techniques and using them in places and communities that are not traditional theatres. So, for example, theatre in education, theatre in prisons, theatre in old people's homes, in using theatre structures, strategies and techniques in community spaces to try and help those community groups express themselves, come together collectively and socially, and also to explore problems that they might be having. So, for example, you might go to a community group and who might be experiencing a concern that affects all of them, and through theatrical techniques and expression they're able to express and explore that issue, and then crucially come to solutions together that might actually aid their situation.
So if we go to that first prong that you sort of mentioned, the sort of, just going to the theatre, and, you said this sort of collective activity, reduction in isolation is just going to, be a positive thing for people's health and well-being. Does it have to be a type of theatre? Does it have to be theatre with a capital T in the West End, costing you, a good amount of money to go there? Or can it be any sort of theatre? And what's the smallest amount of theatre that it could be?
Well, that's a really, really good question. So no is the answer to that question. I mean, going to the West End and seeing a massive show and spending a fortune, great if you can do that. It's a lovely thing to do, and it's really important for the UK economy. So yes, please do go and do that. And certainly there is something about sitting in an enormous and an old theatre that can be very special. But absolutely, that's not what you need to get the health benefits. You can go and engage with a local amateur theatre company that would be performing in a community hall, a community venue, and that would be absolutely brilliant too. In fact, you could argue it would be better because it's already in your community. So the people that are going to be in the audience are more likely to be your neighbours, to be your friends, to be your family, to be the people that you should be interacting with and can interact with. So actually going to see local theatre, supporting local theatre is actually crucial as well.
And if any of our listeners or viewers have they would love to go to the theatre, but they are socially isolated, and that might be because of a disability that they have. Is there a way that people can engage in theatre where they don't have to attend these places in person? I
mean, I think that's a really good point, and a lot of traditional theatre has become much more accessible in recent years. So, for example, most theatres have carers tickets, so you can bring somebody with you if you have a disability that can support you. They're very, very open about seating you in particular places so that you can feel comfortable. So the first thing to say is I think that theatres have done a lot, probably could do more, but have done a lot in recent years to make going to the theatre a really inclusive experience anyway. That said, I think that we also need to look at the big theatre companies that are investing in streaming services. So, for example, NT Live. There are an awful lot through the NT Live platform. They also stream a lot of West End shows. The RSC do it regularly as well. So you can engage with live theatre as such in your own home, and also local cinemas as well where they're streaming it. So if getting out and about is a challenge, then there are ways that you can still enjoy having a theatrical experience.
I think that's a really good thing for us to all reflect on is, if you're involved in any sort of theatre or drama work at all, no matter how big the audience is going to be or how grand the venue, seeing how it can be made as accessible as possible is really important. So thank you for raising that. To the other prong, you sort of started to mention about applied theatre.
Yeah.
Have you got any previous examples of where drama or applied theatre have been used to support health and wellbeing?
So there's many different examples. I mean, applied theatre techniques have been used since the sort of 70s and 80s in a variety of different political and community-based settings, and also that feeds into the Theatre for Development movement, which is around traditionally going into communities in the global south and finding out what problems there might be happening there, and engaging with those communities to be exploring those problems theatrically. So let's perform some of those problems to try to find solutions collectively. So that's the kind of history of applied theatre, or part of the history of applied theatre. What we can see happening in the UK now is a very, very wide range of different practices. So, for example, if you have children in school, they may be visited by a theatre and education company who might use theatre techniques with them to explore any topic, from bullying to recycling to positive body image, really any problem or issue, social issue that you can think of. An applied theatre company can think of a technique to engage you to think about how you might engage with that topic. So theatre and education is probably the biggest thing that happens in the UK at the moment. There are other applied techniques that will be happening throughout the UK at the moment. So, for example, I can think of a really good practitioner who actually graduated from the drama programme here at Loughborough, who set up her own theatre company called Unlock Drama, where they go into prisons and work with prisoners to explore a wide variety of wellbeing and health-related problems. For example, handling substance misuse. So they have a four-day programme of workshops that engages specific prisoners in thinking about what led them to be involved in substance misuse and how they could perhaps come away from that thinking in future, obviously with a final aim ultimately of hoping to reduce reoffending. One of the other things that we see happen regularly is reminiscence theatre, which is typically with older adults, happens in community settings, but also typically clinical hospital settings. And that is a theatre technique that involves talking to older adults about their memories, their experiences, their lives, and then performing them back to them with an aim to increasing memory. And that's been shown to have really positive impact on the progression of dementia.
So I think a really important point that you've sort of highlighted there again is the sort of the breadth of what we mean by health and well-being. You can often think about it as, in a clinical setting, primary care, whether that's, the GP surgery or in a hospital. But bullying in schools, bullying has an impact, negative impact on children's health and their well-being. And so any way in any setting we can look to alleviate that through different techniques is going to be so important. It's really great to hear how widespread that is in education. And then with prisons as well, with sort of, as you say, substance misuse, I would never think about it in that way, that might be a place for theatre and drama to come in. Is there anything that you know about sort of when, rehabilitation of people, bringing people back into sort of everyday society, whether that's because they've had any sort of injuries or because they've been in prisons? Is there anything like that? I could see a space for it basically in my head, but I don't know if that's something that's out there.
That's a really good question. I mean, to go back to the point you made initially, rather than responding to that immediately, when you talked about clinical settings and how that's not the be all and the end all, that's really true. But also there has been research that has shown that even within hospital settings, particularly for children and paediatrics, to be engaging with and interacting with performers during medical procedures has been shown to lessen their perception of pain, which is obviously so important, particularly for children who are in hospital and are likely to be experiencing quite a lot of mental distress and potentially trauma. So yes, the answer is there's a very, very wide spectrum, but also things are happening at the kind of the real coalface of clinical treatment and procedures as well. In terms of rehabilitation, that's a really, really interesting question and something I think really could be explored more, particularly with perhaps people coming back from traumatic situations. So I'm thinking, for example, armed forces. That might be one of the places where drama therapy is something that we would look to be exploring. Now, I'm not an expert in drama therapy because that's very much more in the kind of counselling discipline rather than the applied theatre discipline per se. But in the same way that we might think about music therapy, art therapy, and talking therapies as well, obviously, but drama therapy, I think, would definitely fall into a really, really good strategy and technique for working through people who might be coming back into society after having experienced some trauma.
It's really interesting. Again, I know Loughborough University, obviously where this podcast is coming from, we've got the link and work with the National Rehabilitation Centre, which is just in the Midlands, and there could be some interesting space to explore, I guess, in the future. But I'll pause on that topic because one thing we like to do in this podcast is we love to have just a chat and have a convivial atmosphere, but we also want to ask any tough questions that's out there. And I think one thing that comes to mind is sort of why is drama not taken as seriously by many people? Sometimes it can be one of the first things that's overlooked, or it's not really considered as in the real world in terms to help people's health and well-being. It might be perceived as like a fluffier subject. Sure. How would you come back to that?
Well, the first thing I'd say is let's go back to one of the first questions you asked me, which was how did I become involved in theatre? And the answer to that was in schools. The opportunity, tragically and sadly from my perspective, the opportunity for children today to become involved in theatre and drama through education is becoming smaller and smaller because from my perspective, this current government's very, very singular focus on STEM subjects has meant the decline of creative subjects such as drama. So we can see that they are being neglected in the national curriculum, they're not being prioritised, and as a result of that, and I think they're being devalued as well, I think there's been a kind of cultural emphasis on STEM subjects to the detriment of creative arts subjects. And I think as a result of that, we've seen fewer students select to do those options. We see drama A-level really declining in popularity. And as a result of that, we will see universities closing drama programmes, which is currently happening throughout the UK and has happened in this institution as well. It's happened at Loughborough University too. So I think that we really need to stop and think, well, what is important to us as a society? This is not to say that STEM subjects are not important, because obviously they are really important. But I think hopefully this conversation is giving your listeners a sense of the way in which they can work together. There doesn't have to be a divide between STEM and creative arts subjects. Actually, creative arts practitioners, creative arts practice, it can work really, really nicely with trying to explore some of the sorts of questions and problems and challenges that medicine and other STEM subjects really important to them. So I think that the collaboration between those two is really important. But sadly, at the moment, there is a devaluing of creative arts practice and creative arts experience in the UK, particularly, I think, at sort of community level, at perhaps an amateur level, or in education. You talked about big West End shows. They are sort of protected because of the big cultural industry in which the UK wants to sell itself to tourists abroad. That's absolutely fine. You can always go and see Phantom of the Opera in the West End. That's not going to be under threat in quite the same way. But it's those community venues that I was talking about that are threatened. It's learning about drama and learning how to do drama in school and in university. That is what's being threatened. And as I said, I obviously the subjects that are under the STEM banner are really important, but I think that drama offers those subjects a different way to solve some of the problems that they're interested in as well. I think this separation is one of the reasons why people perhaps don't value creative arts and drama more generally. Just to clarify, Loughborough University closed its undergraduate drama provision, but does have 2 master's programmes, one in theatre and one in storytelling.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree with you. I see how passionate you are about this space. I think many people, might see drama always as a capital D. It's a subject. It's going to that West End show, and might not realise how much everyday life is a lot applied theatre in the way that what clothes that we wear and what we do, and so. Drama is everywhere, really, isn't it? Absolutely.
There was a sociologist called Irving Goffman who talked about the fact that we perform in masks every day, and we all do. We all wear a particular costume to come to work. We all sometimes have to put on a different face if we're needing to do something we don't really feel like doing. We're also different people around different members of our community and our families. We behave differently at work to the way we do at home. We're all performing all the time, and we all wear masks and costume, and we can see all of that through the language of theatre. So it really is unfortunate from my perspective to see that drama is something that's separate to our lives, when actually, to me, it's integral.
Yeah, and we can see that if someone's comfortable in the mask, or the mask that's being bestowed to them by their sort of the society that they're in, that can make their health and have an impact on their health and well-being. And that's something again that maybe people don't quite consider.
Yeah, I mean, so it's so interesting that you talked about masks. So just yesterday I spoke with the artistic director of Trestle Theatre Company, who are a company who explore mask work exclusively. So they have a fantastic array of masks that are in set, fixed expressions. They put on traditional theatre shows, but they also work in youth theatre, in community theatre and applied theatre settings to try and do exactly that, to try and understand, if you are given this identity, what does that do to you? Is this an identity that you choose to perform, or is this an identity that you feel forced to perform? And what does that do to you psychologically? What does that do to your well-being? So one of the things that Trestle will do, and again, the current artistic director of Trestle is another Loughborough drama graduate, which is why I was in touch with her. One of the things they will do is try to experiment with swapping those masks. So here's a mask I give you. You may not feel like your true self performing in that mask, but how about if I give you the opportunity to select a different one? Or how about I give you the opportunity to select a mask that might not be part of how people choose to perceive you typically. So I know that you're a very cheerful, happy, lovely person, but sometimes you might feel grumpy and angry and upset. So it might be really liberating for you to choose a mask that has an expression of sadness or of anger or of frustration, and be given a safe place to explore those emotions where you're not going to be judged by the people around you, and it's a safe space to explore the emotions that you perhaps don't typically take on yourself, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I can see that from a psychological perspective how, beneficial that would be for people to explore those parts to them that may be, part of their shadow character. If we look into sort of more Jungian psychology and think, no, instead of repressing that, you might be able to have a safe space to be able to explore those emotions. And we know how beneficial that is, play, how beneficial play is for children. And many adults stop playing. And actually, I would guess then play has a great benefit for health and well-being all the way through people's lives.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so much of theatre practice is basically play. I mean, we tend to think of theatre very much as a rehearsed performance where people go and sit in rows of seats and look at a final show that's been beautifully lit and has lovely orchestra. And of course that is theatre. But actually so much of what applied theatre practitioners do is around having a play, getting up, having fun, interacting with people in a silly, risk-free, safe way, just to explore our interaction with people, to explore our own physicality and our own bodies, and to feel more comfortable with the way that they move in space as well.
You also can see here the parallels between the applied theatre and other medical or clinical subjects. I'm thinking in psychology, you start talking about the mask that you can put on, the very sort of famous prison experiment some decades ago, where participants who were there all with no roles assigned to them when they arrived, but as soon as they were given either the prison guard or the prisoner, they adopted these personalities and these roles, and that led them to behave in certain ways and feel in certain ways as well. So again, we can see that link there.
Absolutely, which makes me think of the famous, sorry to encroach on your territory here, but the famous Milgram experiment. Put somebody in a white coat and they become a doctor, and you will invest your trust in them because you believe that is what a doctor looks like. Really, that's just an actor wearing a costume.
Yeah, and in that experiment, they even went so far as to think they were making someone have a great lot of pain, because they were saying, yep, you need to carry on with this experiment, yep, you should press that button and give someone a shock. So it's amazing how far that goes. Now, I want to draw us back a little bit, but just to finish off that section, that I must say the philosopher that came to mind, RuPaul, we're all born naked and the rest is drag, seems quite apt here, that we all wear these masks outwardly, and how that then comes out in everyday life really does affect how we feel. So if I just want to bring us back now a little bit to thinking about you, Catherine, what are you currently exploring in this area?
So there's a few things that I'm really interested in at the moment. I said I spoke to Helen Barnett from Trestle Theatre Company yesterday. One of the things that we're really excited about exploring together is the way in which mass theatre might be able to help young people in education settings think about their own bodies and about the identity that they feel that they have assigned to them, but other identities that they might want to select instead, and also the way in which they see other people. So one of the things I'm really interested in talking to Helen about at the moment is whether or not we can get a project up and running that explores how young people how they engage with and encounter people who are from a different community or from a different social background. So getting people from different backgrounds together through mask to see the similarities between them and to share experience and to share stories. So that's one of the projects that I'm really interested in to do with mask theatre. Another one that is about to start actually, so it's really exciting, is a project around the reminiscence theatre, which I talked about earlier, which is about going into care homes and doing some applied theatre with a small group there, specifically around eating behaviour and nutrition. So to see whether if we explore and talk about their experiences and memories of food specifically, we can encourage a group of older adults who might be vulnerable to having poor nutrition to eat a little bit more and to eat a little bit better. So that's a project that's recently been funded and is about to start at the end of this month. So that's super exciting. I can't wait to start that. So that's the other thing. Another thing that I'm also just starting to think about and would like to develop further is whether or not use of applied theatre and digital storytelling could be usefully employed in school settings to try and support healthy eating for young adults and adolescents as well. So there's a couple of things that I'm currently involved in.
Sounds very exciting, and I would hope you might be able to come back and tell us how they pan out in a bit. But I know your plates are going to be very full at the moment. Sorry to use the food-related pun there, but in terms of fitting anything more in. But where else do you think needs to be explored in the applied theatre and health world going forward?
I mean, it's really interesting that you talked about rehabilitation, because that's what came into my head when you said that, because we do have those links with the Armed Forces Rehabilitation Centre, and I think that working with people who've come through trauma to use theatre and drama to try and explore some of those experiences in a safe way would be really, 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 really valuable, worthwhile, really useful thing to do. So that would be one thing. I mean, it's really hard to answer that question, because deep down what I would want to say is there isn't really a problem that society, culture or politics can present to us that I don't think that theatre can't also respond to. So really the answer is anything. I think that applied theatre techniques can be used to explore any problem. I know that it's been used in the past there's been research in this school that looks at storytelling to support to think about how we talk about climate change, for example. What are some of the problems that communities who are experiencing climate change, how can talking about those problems and recording those stories, how can that help us move forward more positively in the climate change environment, for example? So my answer would be there's really no problem that you could throw at us that we couldn't solve with applied theatre.
Well, if anyone is listening or watching and they think, I'd love to get involved with something on those lines or on anything that you've talked about already, where can people find you online or anywhere else?
So I'm based in the School of Design and Creative Arts. My office is currently in Martin Hall. I'm happy for people to drop me an email, and I'm also on Twitter.
Wonderful. So just to finish off, one thing again we like to do here is say that if you were to sell your area of academic expertise or your interest to the next generation of curious minds, or maybe your former self, what might you say to them?
I would say don't be nervous. Don't worry about yourself and about what you're doing in class. I would say that drama is it offers you a really safe space to make mistakes, to work with people you wouldn't normally work with, to liberate yourself from the quite strict and structured classroom setting that we would normally encounter sitting behind a desk with lots of books. So the first thing I would say is embrace every opportunity that you have to do drama, because they don't exist as much as you might want them to exist when you become an adult. So that would be the first thing I would say. The other thing I would say is what I said to you previously. I don't believe there's any social, cultural, political problem that we can't address through applied theatre and through coming together creatively. So that's what I would say to your listeners.
So Catherine, thank you so much for joining us today, and thank you very much for watching or listening to the Experts in Health podcast. If you found this show interesting, then please hit the like or subscribe button on the platform of your choice, and you can also check out our other podcast, Experts in Sport, via the links in the description. So we very much look forward to welcoming you back for more health-related discussions in future episodes. Bye-bye for now.